Hello and welcome. I'm your host, author Ryan M. Oliver, and this is the Mighty Books Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Books Podcast. Today with me, I have Patrick Odell, also known as Austin Chambers. So he spends his days concocting ways to drive his kids and grandkids crazy with new and untested dad jokes. The Navy veteran is also an author of several books that blend the post-apocalyptic and military thriller genres, including the Cascadia Fallen and Blades of Grass series. After multiple novels, he's finally getting comfortable with the thought of pursuing writing full-time. The former DoD shipyard manager and his family live near the Hood Canal of Western Washington and long for the day that God needs them to move somewhere warmer and drier. Me too. Until then, they garden and enjoy the few sunny days outside watching Combat Kitty kill moles and squirrels. Patrick, how you doing, man?
Oh, I can't complain.
That's
I
great.
could, but it never does any good. So
That's what I say too. It doesn't help anybody. It just makes things worse.
exactly. Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about some books of yours. You've written quite a few. What's the title of the book we're chatting about primarily today?
Okay. So my very first novel, Cascadia Fallen, Tahoma's Hammer. I had written that book and was had a couple other authors. I didn't know much about beta reading and proofreading and stuff yet at the time, but a few people I had already announced it as going to be a trilogy. And the guy goes, "No, you got 10 books worth of material here." So, so eventually that led to a spinoff series, right? But yeah, Cascadia Fallen, Tahoma's Hammer was the very first book, and I wrote that in the fall of 2018.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, before we hit record, we were talking about, I had heard about you. We worked mutually at the shipyard at one point in time. PSNS, Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, for those who don't know, it's out in Bremerton, Washington, Kitsap Peninsula area. And I had heard that someone in the shipyard had written a book, and it was kind of big news. And what was funny was I was currently in the throngs of writing my own stuff. So I'm like, man, I'd love to connect with this guy and chat. So,
Yeah,
you put it out in the universe, right?
it's always nice to know that someone in the yard heard of you, because for your listeners, that place has like 14,000 employees,
Yes.
and then another 6 or 8,000 at the other branch up there at the submarine base. So
Yep.
when you hear that someone you've never heard of has heard of you, it makes you wonder, was that a needle in a haystack moment, or are your marketing ventures actually taking fruition, right? So
Isn't that funny how that works? I tend not to tell people about my books because I want to see if my marketing works.
yeah, see, that's smart. I didn't do
Yeah.
that. I didn't have any. I was so amped up about writing that original story that I was letting a few of my coworkers read it, and then they would. One guy in particular, several, but there was one guy named Max in particular, came in every day. He's a little bit of an overactor, but he was just like, "Yeah, I can't sleep now," because for your listeners, it's about the 9.0 earthquake. They say we're going to get up here one day.
Yeah.
That's my tagline for that book is not if, but when. When I was writing it, I said, well, let's how can we really destroy Seattle before they destroyed themselves? And so I made it make Mount Rainier erupt, tsunami, the whole thing. So
Oh man, yeah. That's what they've been talking about for years. And were you around when the 2001 earthquake hit?
yeah, in fact, I was a WG8 limited mechanic shipwright at the time.
Oh no
I
way.
wrote a very large wobbly scaffold during that, and that really was the seed for the idea that became Cascadia Fallen 17 years later, right? So
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, I remember that was 2001. I was nearing junior high school at the time, and we were talking about the insanity that would befall Washington, Seattle, this whole region
yeah.
if a 9.0 hit. We were actually studying earthquakes.
Oh yeah.
That's which was just and what's funny is I actually did a project on earthquakes
Okay.
within that same season, and I was just
Right.
like, this is hilarious.
And for your listeners, this is in February of 2001,
Yeah, long time
and
ago.
it was a 6.8,
Yes, it was.
and it was down in the Olympia area. You and I live up west side of Puget Sound.
Yep.
And it was, I don't know, I'm not a geologist. I don't recall. It was like 24 miles deep. And
Was it?
I'm under the impression that is not deep, but it's not shallow.
Okay, it was right in the middle.
So yeah,
Nisqually? Was it the Nisqually quake?
Nisqually was the valley, so they named
Okay.
that's the epicenter valley. Yeah, so I had to do a bunch of this research. Now, granted, it's been 5 years since I wrote that first book, but I still remember a little bit of the nuggets there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's the thing.
every 1.0 is it represents a 10 times exponent over the prior. So to go from a 7.0 to a 9.0 is 1,000 times worse, right?
Isn't that
So
insane? Yeah. So like, so how did you?
maybe I'm not doing my math right, but either way, it's really
Yeah,
bad.
that's okay. We write, we don't do math. It's
Yeah, exactly.
not without a calculator at least. So like, I was always curious as to like how did you get your research? Just go online and research all sorts of things. You watch
Yeah,
movies,
yeah.
read books
But
on devastation of how a 9.0 would react to a big old city like Seattle.
in fact, when I decided I was going to make this happen on this fault line, that was the first thing I had to start looking at was the Cascadia subduction zone fault line, which pretty much parallels the coast about 50 miles off. And it goes from California to Vancouver or past, to Vancouver Island.
Yep.
It's, 700 mile long fault line. It started leading me to think about the tsunami aspect. Now, depending on which way the shelf drops, the
Yeah.
worst of the destruction can go toward the ocean, right? And another thing I learned about tsunamis and all that is the deeper the water, the faster the waves travel. It's relatively shallow 50 miles off our coast.
Yeah.
So if the same thing had happened, out in the middle of the ocean where it's 5, 6, 7,000 feet deep, those waves might travel well in excess of 100 miles an hour, right?
That's
versus
crazy.
50, 60 miles an hour in shallower water. So yeah, it is. The other thing I had learned was the direction of the energy. I say waves here, I'm not talking about water, but the energy itself can also be either less or the same earthquake. If the waves of energy based on that shelf drop were to go west instead of east, it wouldn't be as bad for Portland and Seattle.
Oh, okay.
But 9.0 is going to be bad no matter what. This particular subduction zone, I don't know if this rule applies to all of them, but it happens every 300 to 500 years. And the last one was in 1700.
Oh my
So
gosh.
as I was writing it, was 300. Yeah, we're in the window for not if, but when. In fact, I think a UW research paper, University of Washington paper I'd found had said it was a 20% chance it'll happen in the next 50 years. But that doesn't mean 50 years from now. That means any time between now and 50 years from now.
Oh,
We have
okay.
a 1 in 5 chance of this 9.0 earthquake hitting. So
Holy cow.
yeah,
I remember being down on we used to live on the Illahee State Park area.
okay.
And if for those of you who don't know, it's just one of the state parks that are right on the water. And it's beautiful. If you ever get a chance, go check it out. But I remember, I want to say it was right after we had that 2001 Nisqually quake that we finally had tsunami warning signs go up because of all this documentation, all this research coming out, on the news. It was everywhere. I remember it plastered everywhere. I'd come home after school for like months and I'd see more destruction, more repairs, more worries, more, all the kind of pandemonium that could have gotten really bad if an actual thing had happened, actual earthquake had, or a bigger earthquake had struck. But the
Yeah.
signs are going up. People were learning everything they could about this stuff just so we could stay safe for the big one, because that's what it started. The talk started coming out more.
Well, and what's funny is when it happened, I was already done with my firefighter career at that point. I would volunteer, turned into, I was in the Navy from 1988 to 1992, and then I became a volunteer firefighter in right in the Silverdale area between us there.
Oh, cool.
And I did that for 6 or 7 years. And at one point had even gone to work for a government contractor doing that job up at Bangor
Oh, cool.
in the mid 90s. But they had cut an engine company, laid off a bunch of guys. That's how I wound up back at the shipyard.
Oh, okay.
But either way, through going to college for fire command and administration, studying that, I still had not really taken the threat seriously. And even after riding that scaffold in 2001, it was not until about 2011 or 12 that I really started to look at emergency preparedness and taking that a little more seriously.
Yeah.
And it's funny, what triggered that thought just now was when you were talking about the tsunami warning signs and stuff going up, and you go, well, you know how slowly the wheels of government turn.
Yes.
Not just the federals that you work for and that I used to work for, but local county or whatever states. I was almost a little impressed that they had tsunami warning signs going up, after that event that you're mentioning.
Yeah.
Because if you look at where you work and where I used to work for the DoD, they have just really started working on optimization for that stuff the last 3 or 4 years in the shipyard.
Yeah.
And it's, wait a minute, you guys had a giant earthquake here in 2001. And finally in 2018, 19, you're starting to work on earthquake optimization. So yeah, it was, and what's funny is by the time I'd left there in April of 2021, I had already written 3 or 4 books by that point. My coworkers were all like, they must be reading your books. They kept like, yeah, they must have read these. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So it's pretty funny. Said, no, it's not rocket science. It's all right there in the open. So
yeah, it's a lot of predictive analytics, and just, I mean, you look at history and see when did a earthquake hit, what were the effects of it. It's not anything, out of this world. We've had it happen before. It's just we haven't had it happen here in our known history. So it's kind of funny that they thought they were referencing, your books. There's you ever heard the 1 Second After?
Oh yeah, that was one of the first quote prepper novels I ever read when I started getting into preparedness.
Oh my gosh.
It's eye-opening. And that's a really great example. That's kind of a benchmark for everyone to compare themselves to. So
yes. And that was so crazy too. And I had read that one before I had heard about your book. So I'm like, oh, I need to check his stuff out, because we've always thought about that. Like my mother grew up in the time when Mount St. Helens blew, and she told me about the ash and everything. And, they had to shut things down for a little bit. And they had all this, talk of the super volcano in Yellowstone going off, and like what could happen, what could happen there. So it just kind of got the wheels turning for the prepping. I haven't seen it as hard lately, but back then, I'd say 2000 to 2015, the prepper shows and prepper everying kind of
I think it exploded from about 2012 to 2015. Yeah. And the reason that happened, and that's kind of what caught my eye on the whole thing, was I come back from a TDY trip to San Diego.
Oh, okay.
For your listeners, that's temporary duty. Even the civilians in the military still get deployed, right?
Yep.
I would spend 6 weeks in San Diego, came back just in time for Christmas. My wife and son are watching, I don't know if you guys remember a TV show called Brad Meltzer's Decoded. Yeah, Brad Meltzer is actually a big time, traditionally published thriller novelist, and I think he might even be an attorney.
Okay.
But he had a TV show like on history or whatever called Decoded.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I have heard
and it was on season 2, I think, and they were it was the second season in a row where they had done an episode on the 2012 Mayan calendar coming to an end. I was like, "Are you gotta be kidding me?" But I started watching this show. My son, I remember my wife and son were watching it. So I've been like standing there with a basket of laundry in my hand for like 10 minutes, right? Watching. And I finally sat down and watched. And they had professors, actual preparedness experts, not just woods survivalists, but actual reputable people. And they were talking about just how dangerous humanity will become if they don't have fresh drinking water for 3 days.
Yeah.
And they're going to start becoming dangerous at that point. I was like, holy cow. I started listening to all this, right? And that's really kind of what got the seed planted. And you spend that first year when you first get into preparedness, going through the whole doomsday prepper thing in your head. You got building bug out bags and all these things that are, they're kind of necessary, but it's the same stuff that the media and social media picks apart and uses to make fun of people, right?
It does.
They find the whack jobs that are preparing for this one thing, and they've buried a school bus in their backyard or something, right? Versus just the average citizen that just knows that you can't just rely on the just-in-time delivery system.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're running CPAPs to avoid dying in your sleep, then maybe you need an alternative power source, right? Real life stuff. So,
oh yeah. Well, I mean, and it kind of it really helped out, like when we had the snowpocalypse back in, I think it was 2019, actually.
Yeah, we've had a few over the years.
Yeah, and this one just the most recent, where we had a healthy amount of snow, and we have a lot of hills out here, so it's like this is a serious problem. But my wife and her family were very, very prepared minded. They have the 7 P's: prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
Yeah.
And he's prior Navy, so he retired Navy. And so they've always had hey, there's a huge winter warning coming out go grab food, go grab extra this, make sure you have this just in case you can't get out of your house. And that's how I've always looked at it, is emergency preparedness isn't for the end of the world. I mean, yeah, it'd be
Right.
kind of cool. You have, a compound, everything's you've seen all the shows and
Sure.
everything, and read some of the books too. But just having a few weeks worth of emergency apparel, food, water, just in case stuff happens, is really important. And something I read another book called Lucifer's Hammer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was when my father-in-law got me turned on. He goes, if you read any post-apocalyptic book, read that one.
Well, and that's where the hammer from Thomas
yeah,
Hammer was inspired by that, right?
I wondered about that.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that book's been around, what, 50, 60 years,
Yes.
maybe more. It's a
70s?
granddaddy book.
Yeah. Late 60s,
Yeah.
early 70s.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. If you read it, it's a little bit of a slow grind to get to the ultimate event there. But there's a lot of, things that I don't even know about, because 70s politics and things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Way out of my breath. But there was a scene there, and I won't ruin the story for anybody, but there's a scene that he wanted me to really hone in on. It was when one of the survivors approaches an air shelter, and he's asked by those who are inside, what can you do for us? And it's not like he can provide food, water. It's like, are you a doctor? Do you have a trade knowledge? If I'm now supplying you with food, water, shelter, security, what are you providing for the community?
And that's kind of a trope in the modern post-apoc genre, right?
Yeah.
So, and post-apoc isn't just zombies or EMPs, although those kind of dominate the stories, but it's dystopian nowadays, like what I do, it kind of blend military thriller with it. And to me, it's a major sub-branch of sci-fi. It's a growing genre. A lot of people are making full-time living at it now. So
that's great.
And one of the things new authors need to do, no matter what genre you're in, is identify those tropes that the readers expect. That's something I had learned. This kind of gets off my book per se, but one of the things I realized in 2021, I had gone to a writers' conference and expecting to basically, I'd already written 3 or 4 books, and I was really looking for all the business things to start learning to be better at that.
Yeah.
And I came away from that writers' conference realizing my biggest takeaway was by far craft. I hadn't studied craft. And so I went back and analyzed that original trilogy and realized I had hit a lot of the reader tropes just because I'm a heavy reader.
Yeah.
Of both, I was a heavier reader back when I was in the Navy and when my kids were little than I had been for many, many years. It really was this preparedness thing in 2012 that got me back into reading a lot. And so I didn't know about writing to market, making sure that if you want to sell your books, you have the right things in there that they're expecting to see. And what you just hit on there is you got to bring value to a group if you want to go survive somewhere.
Yeah.
That's why I think Lucifer's Hammer is one of the gold standards for apocalyptic type novels, especially because it's so old. And you had mentioned 1 Second After. That's kind of a modern gold standard for apocalyptic novels. So,
yeah, I think that one was actually 1 Second After was cited at it was in Congress or the Senate, some pretty big hearing about emergency preparedness and how our infrastructure was not to par. And
in fact, whether people like him or hate him, Newt Gingrich had written the foreword for 1 Second After. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's where he mentions that. It's either in the I think it's the foreword, but he wrote a 3 or 4 page foreword for that book, mentioning that the story had been in a 2009 "Our grid is severely unprotected" report to Congress by a subcommittee.
Yeah.
And then you look up the author of that is William R. Forstchen, and you realize, he's not just a fiction novel. He is an actual college professor at the college in the actual story of all places, right?
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So, he's got a lot of resources to really dig into studying when he wrote that, I think. And it's now, a lot of people don't realize I haven't read it yet. He's written the 4th book. I wouldn't call him a trilogy, and I wouldn't call him a typical pulp series like a lot of us write.
Yeah.
But there was 1 Second After, and then 1 year after, or the next year, final year or
like
something.
The last second or last day or something like that.
And then now I think there's a 4th one that just came out or is coming out. I don't remember now. So
I've been wanting to finish that series, but I've, been
Yeah.
busy. I want to read everything, but I don't have the time to read everything and do what I
Yeah,
want to do.
that's where audiobooks come into play for your commute, right?
That is true. Yeah. I've been doing a lot of podcasting lately. I mean, actual like doing them, what we're doing now here and listening as well, just because experts and things, you want to
Mhm.
be kind of well-rounded on topics, because
Yeah.
well, I love reading nonfiction, and I love reading like almost pseudo fiction nonfiction where it could happen, kind of like yours, like the Rainier could blow at
Yeah.
any freaking second. It absolutely could blow. And you kind of go into the what ifs of real life. I love that kind of stuff. So
We need to slow down to a 30-hour day or something so we can have time to read. Maybe not, but
30-hour work week. That sounds good to me.
well, yeah, I've always been an advocate of the 2-day work week.
Oh yeah.
But we would have to get paid 2.5 times as much, right? So
I mean, I'm pretty efficient, so
yeah,
it might work for me. I could not see that selling to the bosses. That would not go very well.
no.
I'm not training everybody that fast. So, what stuck out for Rainier? Like, why Rainier? Just because it was been a looming threat forever?
Well, it was easy. It's low hanging fruit. It's right there by Tacoma, and on top of that, we had
True.
like you said, St. Helens. That was in 1980. I was
Yeah.
10, going on 11 in Texas.
Yeah.
I was a little detached from that. Not
Oh,
like
okay.
your relatives who lived here or whatever at the time, but it was an easy case study. And because it
Oh, yeah.
happened 40 years ago, everyone knows that it's extremely possible. It's not, most of the time when we're in, especially in modern age where we're inundated with news and social media at every turn, right?
Yeah.
If there's, in fact, right now, as we're recording this, just like 3 or 4 days ago, they're talking about a possible volcanic eruption on some islands down in the Pacific. I've seen the headline twice. I haven't clicked on the article, and the chances are the vast majority of people have no idea that's even about to happen. But if you live in that part of the world, that's big news, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And it's the same thing here. I think Mount Rainier erupting would be huge news around the world for a couple of days. But it would be, life-changing news for anyone that lived within 500 miles of it. So,
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think there was even talk of there was some activity. They thought they heard some activity from Rainier. Is it Rainier or Helens? And that might have been Helens. I think Helens is still active.
oh yeah, they all are.
Yeah.
In fact, people don't realize that not all volcanoes are stratovolcanoes with the big cone like that. There's
No.
actually 20 volcanoes in this state.
Oh my
We,
God, it's
we
20?
all think, yes, we think of the 3 or 4, Baker, Rainier, St. Helens, and Adams, and then you got Hood down there in Oregon.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's actually, and don't quote me on that number, but it was a huge number. I think it was 20. It's like I said, it's been a few years since I did all that research.
Wow.
Yeah, it blows your mind. Whatever the number is, it's going to be like, what?
Yeah.
So,
Well, we're a part of the Ring of Fire. If you look at a map,
yeah,
you'll see a big old circle. And where are the activity? All around there. And off the coast of us, you go north, coming around to Russia, coming down, and all the way south of us. It's crazy. It is. I mean, it makes the world go round. Active volcanoes actually mean that we have a healthy world for the most part.
yeah,
So things are moving. That's
yeah,
how it's supposed to go.
yeah. It's kind of like fiber
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
cotton.
molten lava. I can see the resemblance.
Yeah.
I can see the resemblance. A little different colored, but you know what? That's okay. That's okay. I love that. So after Mount Tahoma or Tahoma's Hammer, you had two more right after that. Are they
Yeah.
following the same group of people, character, or is it different perspectives, different timelines? What are those two like?
It's kind of yes and both. And that helped me evolve. I'll just go squirrel real quick before I answer that.
No, sure.
The spinoff series, which does not have to be read after, it's called Blades of Grass.
Yes.
I'm writing very linearly in that one book, even though some of the characters stay the same and some change, the book is linear, the book series.
Yeah.
And in Cascadia Fallen, I had the very first inkling of what I wanted to do. I knew I had a lot of stories I wanted to tell, and I knew I hadn't hit all of the types of characters I wanted to hit.
Yeah.
And when I decided to write book 2. So one of the things I had done was there was this pair of guys that didn't even have names. I had given one a name just in his description on the back of his ball cap.
Oh, okay.
He was wearing a 2nd Ranger Battalion ball cap with his name on the back, right?
Yeah.
So a pair of character, I have this one character pairing in in the original book, Tahoma's Hammer. And for those that don't realize it, Tahoma is the Native American word for Tacoma, right? So
Okay.
that's what they used to call the mountain. But I had this particular storyline was about a young 20-year-old sailor lady who's trying to get back to her ship. And then a doctor who was trying to fly home to Los Angeles, and he's a narcissistic plastic surgeon. But because of this, everything's happened. Now he's going to try to make his way back to his parents' house. And they have to pair up together just for mutual assistance. Like, within a few seconds, they've learned to trust each other. And even though they don't like each other. So, and in their story, they had crossed paths with these two guys that just kind of exude veteran, right?
Okay.
And not just veteran, not just looking at where we live, the chubby Navy veteran. These guys exude. And of course, I had built these guys and these characters in my head to be former Rangers.
Uh-huh.
And I really wanted to go back and tell their story. So on top of that, in book 2, I was expanding the antagonist to be, in that book, all of the local criminal types are kind of aligning under the banner of the major dominant outlaw motorcycle club.
Okay.
And one of those guys is in a prison that's specifically for sexual offenders, right? Mm-hmm. So I had all these different new characters to tell. So I took the main character and the main plots surrounding Phil, who's really the series' main character, and continued those stories in time. Because the first book took place over the course of about 18 or 19 days.
Oh, okay.
And so those stories continue to take place, but with these new characters, I go back in time and you get to relearn, you experience the earthquakes and stuff all over again through their perspective. And then their stories catch up in timeline by the end of the book.
Yeah.
And then in the third book, the main antagonist winds up being the cartel that's kind of taken over and aligned all bad guys, right? And by then, I think I've got 1 or 2 newer characters in that third book. They are point of view, but their stories really only serve the main. Everything's converged by the third book, right? And they're serving the main story at that point. Yeah. But so book 2 and 3 kind of go back in time a little bit.
Cool.
But I always have timestamps at the beginning of a section. It'll say TH, which stands for Thomas Hammer, plus 2 days, plus 14 days, whatever.
Smart. Yeah, no, that would definitely help with something like that. I mean, I don't think you could do a book like yours without having flashbacks, especially with new people, because I love the different perspectives. You might have, this person was in a small home. This person was in a huge building. This person was closer. Exactly. So you can see the effect of, because I mean, if you look at, they've had perspective maps of if Rainier were to blow and the wind was pushing this way, how would this affect it? Odds are this is where it's going to go. It's going to catch this. And you never know, depending on the time of day, week, year, season, it could really drastically change how things affect the environment.
One of the nuggets I remember from my research was that after St. Helens, they were, they did, environmental engineers or whoever did sampling, and they found St. Helens ash on the East Coast within a day because of the jet stream.
Whoa.
And it took about 2 weeks for that ash to basically circle the entire globe.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's absolutely insane. I mean, I've heard of the super volcano, the one that's like said in Yellowstone. I heard that
there's
one.
A lot of series about that. I've never read them, but there's some series out there that.
Yeah, I haven't read any series, but I've watched. They had a documentary for like 2 episodes, years ago, mind you. It was a Discovery Channel or something, and they had said that if that goes, basically we're going back into an ice age to some degree. Like a climate change is going to happen really fast because it's going to basically block out the sun for X amount of who knows how long, and it's just going to change everything. When in comparison to the super volcano, one little mountain can throw ash around the world.
Correct. Yeah.
It's mind-blowing at the size and scale in which we're talking here. It's just, there's so many possibilities. That's probably why it's such a popular genre.
Yeah. Most people read fiction books because they connect on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And perhaps, a listener's flavor is there's a lot of fantasy, that's popular now, and romance. but there's still some element in there. Ultimately, our negative emotions always come down to fear or anger.
Yeah.
And those are what strike a chord with us when we fall in love with the journeys characters are going through, right?
Yeah.
As they say in the writing world, you have to break their legs. I don't know if you've heard that one, but a lot of people talk about when things are going too well for your character, the story gets boring, break their legs, right? That's just a euphemism for give them some obstacles to overcome.
Right.
And that's where a lot of new writers, they don't realize that it can't always be a happy ending, and it can't always be a happy journey either. Your people are going to connect with falling for these characters.
Yeah.
And then going through the anger and the fear with them. And I think that's why so many people, like I said, when you and I were emailing back and forth, everyone can relate to being scared of a massive earthquake or getting eaten by a shark or whatever, right? We all relate to certain fearful things because they're out of our control.
Yes.
So, yeah, it doesn't have to be, like I said, zombies. In order for post-apoc, anyone can read these things on both sides of the political spectrum, the religious spectrum, whatever.
Yeah.
And find some common ground with their own internal fears, right? So.
Oh yeah. I mean, and just thinking about it, I mean, when you think of just what people are capable of doing to each other, that's frightening enough. And a desperation, fear. People get, you've heard of the term hangry before.
Yeah.
Okay, they missed a meal. Imagine missing 10
or a
meals.
Snack.
Yeah, they missed a snack. I mean, my kids get hangry and they're just cute, but you get them, 6'3", 300 pounds, haven't eaten in 5 days. They've watched people die. They're
You
horrified.
just reminded me of a funny story from work.
Oh, okay.
And this is before I was into preparedness at this point, but I had not written a book yet. So probably 3 or 4 years before that even. And this, but for your listeners, where we work, it's such a big place that the waterfront workers, typically where they muster and have lunch, we just call that a shack, right? I don't know if you guys at Bangor do, but yeah, these guys are hanging around in the shack or the muster area. I don't know, lunchtime or whatever, talking. And a lot of guys up here into hunting or shooting or whatever. So they're talking about guns and this and that. And there was this one fella who had mentioned he was not into guns or shooting at all, but he was into preparedness, and he had all these things. And he was bragging about it, and he didn't realize that part of preparedness is not telling everyone what you got. Because one of the guys is really into the guns, goes, "Yep, I'm into preparedness too. I just need to come to your house when it's all So yeah, it was pretty funny. Yeah.
Well, and that's actually something too. It's knowing who your friends are and knowing who you can rely on to basically counteract your flaws.
Yeah.
If someone is a great shooter, he or she would make a great hunter, or someone who's handling security. And it's like, but not everyone can know everything, and that's the hard part.
Yeah,
and that's why you need to get together.
It's almost call this a trope again, but one of the core principles in typical apocalyptic or dystopian type books, the bands of survivors, everyone figures out you can't stay awake 24 hours a day.
No.
You need people you can trust. And so there's a lot of parallels to that in your real life planning. I think the books that fail to identify that, like every character is a former Navy SEAL who doesn't need anyone and always manages to procure what he needs without a challenge or obstacle. Those books don't tend to succeed very well. So
it's almost kind of like when you think of, I kind of relate that to superhero ones like Superman, for instance. He is just basically virtually invincible. I've never really resonated with that kind of character because he's virtually indestructible. You can't destroy him except for some minor thing. Kind of the same thing with a lot of the other characters who are just so resourceful, so intelligent, so have the best luck ever. Like that doesn't happen. Happen. And especially during panicking times, panic, your brain just flushes that silver handle in your mind there when something bad happens. Not everyone does, but a lot of people just go, I forgot what my name is right now.
Oh yeah. Well, again, I was Navy veteran, surface Navy, as gunner's mate. in the first Gulf War, and then a firefighter for all those years. And
Oh
then
yeah.
in civil service, I worked in the scaffold builders world
Yeah.
around nuclear reactors and stuff. So I've exposed myself to a lot of risk and stuff over the years.
Yeah.
And people, you have to train, right?
Mhm.
And this isn't just about shooting or whatever, but any kind of emergency medical, right? You come across a wreck on the highway,
Yeah.
I mean, a bad one, and you're like one of the, I've done this, but not even just in the fire department, but in fact, it's ironic. It was 2019.
Oh,
I didn't know much yet about things like editing and making book covers.
yeah.
I mean, I really took my time launching that first book because I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I was driving up to Paulsbo and rounded the curve on the highway, and like within 30 seconds, a big accident had just happened.
Man.
And there was already people pulling over and running to go help and stuff. I have a medical kit hanging from the headrest of my seat of my truck, right?
Oh, nice.
I can always just open that back door, grab that thing, and be ready to go.
Mhm.
But no matter what your training and experience is, when the real deal hits you in a second's notice,
Yeah.
a lot of things go right out the window. Thoughts, rational thought. You see a lot of people panic, right? Yeah. Especially if it's their loved one that's hurt.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that before where people normally who are really calm under pressure, and as soon as you add a personal person to that, a loved one, it just hits them in a different way. It hits them a way different way. Usually people can come in logically as best as you can. I mean, in any emergency situation, you're going to have some panic there, but they come in a little more logical, can actually handle the situation. It's still stressful, but can get things done. It's you've heard of immersive therapy. I mean, you're basically coming in. The only best way you're going to get better at reacting to things like that is to, unfortunately, get yourself put into risky or dangerous situations. And we don't necessarily want to do that, but if that's part of your job, to react well,
and
pressure.
that's why I advocate, like, go get quality training, even if you're not into shooting or stuff. There's combat casualty care classes nowadays that are pretty easily found with a little bit of internet searching. From medics, paramedics, EMTs, former military medics. It's basically a stop the bleed class, right?
Oh, okay.
Back in the day, it was all about first aid, CPR. The last several years, a new movement called Stop the Bleed has come on, and it's specifically about treating massive blood loss. It's open to civilians, right?
Oh, okay, cool.
Good training,
Yeah.
but you can go take a 1-day, 8-hour class. And the thing is if you're nervous trying to put a tourniquet around a stranger's groin, right, in front of a room full of strangers in an environment where they're not bleeding to death, it's only going to be 100 times worse if you're actually going to try to save someone's life at that moment.
Yeah, and the consequences are a lot higher.
So go take that class and be ready, right? It's a good, like you said, it immerses you in that fear factor just a little bit. You take a CPR class, no one ever volunteers to be the first one to do the compressions because they don't want to mess up in front of the others.
Right.
That is an identical small scale feeling of what you'll go through when you actually have to do CPR on someone. So
yeah, it is a thing. I mean, for myself, with getting used to like the, not necessarily risky, but more uncomfortable situations, I used to hate public speaking. Hate it.
You became an instructor,
and I'm an instructor now. Yeah. So it was just one of those things that, through either my fault or no fault, became that way. And to this day, if I get in front of people, I'm fine, because I've had to go through, no kidding, years and years of practice, repeat, do over, keep going. You can take those times, take that, like, that's really strange. Even in the middle of an emergency, you take that second to just close your eyes, take a quick breath, collect yourself, and go. Those 2 seconds of breath will save you so much time, agony, and pain of trying to collect your thoughts.
That's true.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but I found it works really well, even under just weird circumstances like that. But yeah, anyway, so we were talking about your pseudonym, because your name's Pat and you go by Austin Chambers. And because I had asked you, I want to make sure it was okay to talk about. Could you talk about the decision to use a pseudonym versus your real name for come out as your books or authorize your books?
Yeah, that really was. I've learned now there's good, valid reasons to have a pen name.
Sure.
And some people still try to use pen names to separate their personal life, because it can be a little bit evasive. People even a smaller author that's grown a small following, you still wind up with people messaging you all the time and things, right? But at the time, I was a manager in this DoD shipyard. I was writing a story that, and I dialed down, it was not as techno thriller as Clancy. I write a lot like Time Clancy, where I have multiple storylines that all meet at the right spot.
Cool.
But I was worried that the nuclear components of one of the subplots might attract negative attention from the Navy. Sure. I way overthought that. So I dialed down the technicality in that storyline quite a bit, just to make sure I wasn't spilling information I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
And one of my beta readers, this won't mean anything to your listeners, but he works for Code 105, right?
Yeah.
And he was, no, you can really talk about this, and you can find all this information on the internet. I go, Randy, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not okay to say, right? So I dialed it down, but by then I'd already chosen a pen name and announced it and all that. And the other half of it was I didn't really know much about the self-publishing world.
Right.
And I had met a couple of authors who were, their whole identity of their brand, I should say, is built around preparedness, right? They have podcasts, big successful book series and stuff, and it's all about the preparedness aspect. And because of that, and they lean right politically, they attract a lot of negative attention from the left.
Mm-hmm.
So between not wanting the Navy to come back and yell at me and thinking I was going to have, and I don't, but I was thinking I was going to have this huge negative thing coming from one end of the political spectrum, I decided to have that pen name. Later on, though, I mean, I just had so many friends and beta readers and stuff who knew my real identity. It became apparently silly, but it would be even sillier now at this point to not keep that brand name.
Yeah.
Related to all these book series, I'm just very open about it on my bio, whether it's on my Amazon page or my website. And the other value for your listeners who may be thinking about getting into writing is, if you ever do want to write in more than one genre, a lot of people do have different pen names for that. Even if everyone knows who they are, they might have. I have a good friend in this genre who's more successful than me, Boyd Craven the third. There's two Boyd Cravens. There's the dad, who's junior, and the third. They're both highly successful authors in the post-apoc genre. I've actually met Boyd third at a couple of different events. Great guy.
Yeah.
He won't tell me what it is, but he actually makes a bigger living writing in romance under a completely different woman's pen name, right?
Really?
Oh, yeah, huge. He makes a huge living doing that. And the value there is if you wind up with fans who really focused on one genre, you don't necessarily want to cross-pollinate them on your newsletters and stuff. Right. And so there is value in having pen names. And so that means there's also value in me not trying to drop it entirely. Right. If I ever go and write books under my real name, I'll just do a genre change and do it that way. So,
yeah, that's kind of what I've also heard of, like, because my author name is Ryan M. Oliver. And if I ever wanted to do like a genre change or something different, I might just go RM Oliver, because it drops my first name, still uses my middle initial. It still has that. At least it attaches to some degree. I thought about doing that. That's true.
Especially if the genres are somewhat related. So, but the other thing is, people don't think about this until they've been in the game for a while. All of that also, it doesn't just affect people signing up for your newsletter. It's about, like, most of us start on Amazon in the indie publishing world. We start on Amazon, and even if our ebooks aren't exclusive to Amazon, and we're going to take those wide. Yeah. We don't realize how much the algorithm. They say the algorithm. Amazon has multiple algorithms. And some of them are based on the Autobots. Some of them are based on what other people are also looking at. Yeah. The top 100 list. There's the bestsellers list. There's all these different algorithms, and a simple name change like that might be enough to where you're talking about just a subtle name change. Yeah, might be enough to still keep some of your algorithm learning intact when you go upload your new profile. So
interesting, yeah, because it's similar. It's similar enough where it's going to suggest your items. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. There's a lot to consider, and I've always told people that the best thing you can do if you're coming in brand spanking new and you're going to be an indie author, because a lot of publishers nowadays are hard to actually get into. There's a lot of smaller publishers you can find. But finding some kind of a person like like Patrick here, who can actually tell you
Yeah.
what to do and what not to do, or listen to this. This podcast is a lot of indie authors and people who've done it for a long time, and go, hey, here's what I learned. And I mean, I had a publishing coach, and even with a publishing coach, I can still tell you things that I would have loved to have changed or done differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just there's so many decisions to make. So, but it's
There is.
yeah,
And at the time, there's so many of them. It all seems like minutia. They're all important.
yeah,
And this is one of my learning stumbles. It took a long time to learn balancing just writing words down for the day, right?
yeah,
And then doing the business side. Some people, they only want to do the writing.
mm-hmm.
And then they don't understand why they're never going to make a living at it.
Right.
Yeah, you can't ignore that business side. But what you can do is if you master the basics of growing your business to a point where you're profitable, eventually you make enough money back to buy your time back, right?
Yeah.
You can start hiring out a personal assistant who specializes in Amazon ads or Facebook ads.
There you go.
Or someone who can handle, let's say, when you go to write a book, you finish your draft one, and now you're going to get it to your editor, and then you're going to get it to your beta readers.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of email that goes back and forth with all that, right? Maybe you can hire out a VA to handle all that for you so that now you're on to writing the next one, right? But it's baby steps. You got to get to that point. So
yeah, and you also need to be honest with yourself of what you're good at, what you like doing, because there's a lot that I've just from doing the podcasting and the writing and the authoring and all that stuff. There's so much that I really love doing and things I do not like to do.
Yeah, no. A couple of years ago, I had accidentally, and when I say accidentally, I had a small preparedness related YouTube channel. I don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
So I won't even bother naming it, but I've networked with a few YouTubers over the years, guys who plugged my books for me and stuff. And one of them plugged my channel, and I went from like 80 subs to 1,500 subs overnight.
Whoa.
And got it to about 2,600. But then I realized I really don't like doing videos. It's to shoot good quality educational videos with multiple angles, and it's a lot. You put 15 hours into editing.
Oh my god!
And then last year, I want to go back to this one day when I can buy my time back. But I started a podcast that was more about just positivity, entrepreneurship, improving your life, growing through your mistakes. And I had to shelve it because, again, I was distracting myself.
Yep.
The last year, I realized, I need to turn this into something profitable before my accountant gets mad at me. And even more importantly, my boss, ComNav Wife Pack, right? For you non-veteran related people, that's an acronym for Household 6, which is what the Army guys call their spouse. But I had to get back to basics, concentrate on writing books, concentrate on learning how to grow the brand, grow my newsletter, get better, get profitable ads. Luckily, I am finally at a point now where both Amazon and Facebook ads are profitable. It's just a matter of learning to gingerly scale those. If you try to do too much, everyone sees a profitable ad immediately. It's kind of like, remember that abominable snowman character that used to hug the crap out of Bugs Bunny?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we do to our ads when they're profitable. You can't do that. You have to nurture them, right? So,
yeah. Isn't that funny? You have to kind of tailor it to the audience as it comes in, because as people come in, they have different interests, and you can tailor it to that person. It's a whole new audience that you can, promote your books to. Yeah. So but that's an art form in itself. I have not mastered that by any means.
No, it takes a long time, and it's the kind of thing that once, like me, I'm kind of hyper focused.
Yeah,
I'll get into a project like revamping my newsletter onboarding sequences, and I don't know if you use BookFunnel at all, but using BookFunnel promotions to try to find new subs or whatever. Yeah. And I'll find all of a sudden I haven't written in a week and a half because I've been so ingrained in this giant project. I constantly have to keep myself in check on that. So
yeah, I keep telling the last few people I've interviewed, I got to get back into I was doing 100 words a day for as long as I could go. And it was great because the things would start flowing, even on days where we're not very productive. But because as soon as you stop, it's hard to get that momentum back. And so
and you got a good podcast here, and it looks like you're putting out episodes almost every week. And I know that takes a lot of time.
It does.
But as long as you have that full-time career, you've got to either make yourself do that 100 words a day or just concentrate on one or the other. I think,
it's
like
hard.
I said, maybe one day I can buy my time back and pull that podcast back into play. But for the time being, I decided this is what God meant me to do is to write and to try to inspire people with those writings. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are there, speaking of writing, is there any more books in the works, or are you focused on the 6 you have right now?
So I'll try to do the 30-second version, the setup to this, which is people don't realize there's a thing called writing to market. And if you're an small-time indie author and you're doing all your own marketing, you have to and a lot of people view that. I think that these are people that haven't evolved their thinking. They view writing to market as a negative thing. Like, no, I have to change the story I want to write just to get the tropes met and to write pulp fiction and try to make a living. It's not like you can do both. To me, you can write to market, which is basically writing the stories that you want to write that still meet the reader expectations. But people don't realize that when you write a book 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 after that book one, all that money you've spent on advertising translates into, it becomes a bigger profit margin each and every time. They call it read through for people who are in Kindle Unlimited, which means, and you can look at once you learn how to do it, you look at the metrics and analyze the data on your Amazon ads platform, and you see, this is literally 45% of the people that read my book 1 march on through to read book 2.
Oh, cool.
But 90% of those people continue to carry on.
That's awesome.
So when you spend, let's say your profit margin on an ebook for a book is going to be $2.50, $3.50.
Yeah.
And your ad cost you $5. You go, I can't. People turn those ads off, not realizing that if you've got 3 or 4 or 5 books, you will carry through it, especially if you got audiobooks, because there's a trickle down effect to people who only want to buy audiobooks and they've seen your ad. So they go, but that audiobook sale doesn't become part of the metrics, right? Yeah. So between read through and sell through, serials is the way to go. Okay. So sorry, that took a little longer than I guess it should have. But to answer your question, I am right now about almost halfway through draft 1 of book 4.
Nice.
In the Blades of Grass series. Awesome. And I guess if you give me another minute, I'll explain that.
Absolutely.
Blades of Grass is a spinoff of Cascadia Fallen. When I wrote Cascadia Fallen and realized I had left a lot of material on the table because I called it a trilogy. Yeah. I started looking at the impact. I said, okay, so in this book, I've basically destroyed the nation's largest exporter of hydroelectric power, right? We wiped it out. So, because Washington State exports most of its hydroelectric power to California and to other states. Yeah. On top of that, I destroyed Amazon, which is one of the largest online commerces in the world. Right. I've destroyed Microsoft, which is the company that has to put out multiple security updates every day to keep the world's computer systems from crashing. Right. I did all these things. It's okay, socioeconomically, in Boeing, right? Yeah, Boeing, if all that really happened, what would be the trickle-down effect? So in my story, I had Russia and China almost immediately start going to war because they want to be the top dog now, right? Oh yeah. And then by the end of the original trilogy, the cartel has kind of stepped up and said, so I don't know if people don't realize this. In real life, the cartels are very self-restraining here on this side of the Mexican border, right? The drug cartels, the human traffickers. But in the right case of events, like America crippled by some sort of massive set of natural disasters or a massive cyber attack or something, they may take the gloves off. Yeah. So, and I had challenged people to remember, I'm just writing a fiction story here. Okay. All fiction is about taking something realistic, putting a slight twist on it, and then running with it. Right. Yeah. And so that's what I did. In the trilogy, the cartels had tried to take advantage of that series. But in the actual spinoff, they've also done the same thing. They're starting to do that nationwide. So the Blades of Grass starts off with kind of a cartel issue and the American military trying to react to that, while at the same time China and Russia are duking it out. And then it culminates with the Chinese invasion of America, which happens in book 2 and 3. Right now I'm pinning book 4. It's full on war in America now. This is going to go on 7, 8 books at least. I could probably go 10 if I really wanted to. I have another spinoff series in mind for the future for Alpha Cascadia Fallen. It's going to follow a specific character around the world as he's trying to recover I left one open thread in that entire original trilogy. And I don't want to ruin it for anyone, that it involves a child that no one ever found.
Okay.
So this guy is out to try to find this missing 4-year-old girl.
Oh my God.
And so that's another spin-off series. It's called Connor's Mission. That'll be coming one of these days. And then, of course, on top of that, I actually want to play with some other genres too. So right now, Blades of Grass #4 is what's about halfway through being drafted. I'll probably have that released to my website around the end of February, and then on Amazon around the end of March.
Man, you are busy. That's great.
Well, I'm trying to make a buck. So
that is so cool. Yeah, I have several friends of mine who would just devour books like yours, and I am not. I've got many actually retired Navy vets
when we push cancel on the recording, give me their names, and no, I'm just kidding.
I'll give them to you after.
Well, but I'll I know you're going to allow me to plug myself at some point here at the end, but I'll tell you right now, the first book, To Homeless Hammer, is always free on my website.
Oh, sweet.
The ebook.
Yeah,
obviously I can't afford to give away a paperback to everyone who asks, but all they got to do is sign up for the newsletter. And of course, like any newsletter nowadays, you can unsub if you don't want to stay on it.
Yeah.
But you get a book funnel link. Go grab that entire, it's the full novel, not an excerpt.
Oh, great.
And that's a good way for people to get on my newsletter and get a sample of that first. And, it's a little raw, a little rough in a couple of spots because I really didn't know what I was doing yet.
You were new.
And the only other distinction I always try to point out is the audiobooks are original Gen 1, full of everything's identical except in Gen 2. I've only left it the cussing down to like the D word and the H word.
Okay.
And maybe one strategically placed A word, right? I've removed the F-bombs and stuff.
Oh, okay.
But in the original audiobooks, I've never had the money to go back. And so you got a few F-bombs in those too, right? If people who don't know, I know it's a common thing nowadays. I'm still trying to appease all listeners. And like a mentor of mine told me, who are you going to offend by not cussing, right?
Yeah.
So, but other than the lack of F-bombs and the lack of foul language from the bad guys, it's very realistic and gritty. So
I love it. Cool. So actually, that just leads right into the last question I did have for you: is where can we get copies of your books?
Okay, author AustinChambers.com. So again, it's author Austin Chambers. A little bit long, but there was another Austin Chambers out there who does something in the real world that already had the URL. And then Amazon. Obviously, most of my sales still come through the Amazon platform, but I am slowly branching out to selling everything. So all of my papers and available audiobooks, I haven't caught up to all of my books on audiobook yet, but I'm mostly there.
Nice.
But they're all available on my website. And the older original Cascadia Fallen trilogy ebooks are available on my website. The only thing that's not on my website is the Blades of Grass ebooks.
Okay.
Those are exclusive to Amazon right now.
Oh, nice. Well, awesome. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking to me. This is really, really fun and really interesting, and glad we got to connect after I learned your name.
No, I appreciate you finally get me on here. You called me, and I'm never going to turn down an opportunity.
Yeah,
I've checked out your podcast, and it just gives me a new thing to listen to now.
Great. So, I'm glad that someone who's so ingrained already in the authorship life is able to take some value out of it. So yeah, that's good. There's so many people worth listening to, and just different, like you said, different perspectives, and it's just fun to learn from different people.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I really appreciate you coming on here and taking time out of your busy schedule of writing a lot, which is awesome. And
thank you.
I need to learn from you.
Well, don't do what I did and quit your job before you retire.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna hang out for a long time. I got 20 something, almost 30 years left. So,
but that said, I wrote that original trilogy in a year and a half while working full time at the yard, right? So
yep,
it can be done.
It can.
But you're also growing a good podcast, so you may have to balance that out a little bit. But
That's what I'm trying to do. Is I
Yeah.
love doing the podcasting, something I never thought I'd ever do, and I'm like, this is really fun, but I got to get into back to the nitty gritty of writing stories. I've got a manuscript right here that I'm red pen editing as we speak every day. So
the one I've never done this, but one pearl you might try is just if you got enough leave on the books, schedule an entire week off that is not a family vacation.
I thought about that.
But they go get borrow someone's spare bedroom, go get a cabin somewhere, or and you may spend a few bucks doing that. But that a lot of people do these writing retreats.
Yep.
And they leave their phone at home. They only go 10 miles away.
Right.
So if there's an emergency, they can be found. But that's a good way to do it.
Yep, I've thought about the new library in town. I think it's in Silverdale. They've got little, I think, study nooks.
I haven't been in there yet. It used to be the old high school there.
Yeah, yes. I have to go look. I looked online. I haven't actually gone over there, but I'm like, I think they have little study nooks you can rent out and borrow, and just kind of like lock yourself in for.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
You know what I mean? So, I've seen them before at the colleges and whatnot. So, who knows? But anyway, man, I really appreciate it. So, thanks again for coming on here.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, guys, I hope you really enjoyed that. Go get some amazing post-apocalyptic fiction, military thriller. Look out for his stuff. Go on websites. He's got a free ebook for you. Why not? There's no excuse. There's no excuse. Go get some good stuff. I know I need to do the same. So, all right, guys, I hope you had a great time listening. And as always, stay mighty and keep reading. Are you an author? Do you know someone who is? If so, then message me, Ryan Oliver, at ryanmoliver.com to set up a free appointment to discuss being showcased on the Mighty Books podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Mighty Books YouTube channel and share the link to this and more episodes with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. So long for now. Stay mighty and keep reading.